These players changed tennis forever. Let's count down the game changers. Let's kick things off with Lleyton Hewitt. He is only 20 years old in 2001 when he becomes the youngest male ever to reach world number 1. But the detail that lingers in memory isn't his ranking, it's the primal "come on" shout that echoed through arenas like a war cry. Hewitt turned celebration into psychological warfare, locking eyes with opponents, sometimes inches away, pumping his fist until veins bulged. Fans loved the fire. Opponents, they saw it as harassment. Matches often became theater, a single point followed by deafening screams, a ritual repeated dozens of times. Imagine being across the net when every lost rally comes with a stare so sharp it feels like a blade. It rattled even veterans. Officials realized this wasn't just passion, it blurred the line between expression and intimidation. By the early 2000s, the ATP quietly reinforced hindrance and sportsmanship guidelines, making it clear vocal celebration is fine, but weaponizing it crosses into violation. Ironically, Hewitt's raw energy helped redefine what unsportsmanlike conduct could mean. And speaking of style shaping the rules, what happens when clothes and equipment force tennis to react? Coming in at René Lacoste. Picture Paris in the 1,920 seconds crowds in straw hats, clay dust rising in the air. René Lacoste, nicknamed the Crocodile, isn't only slicing backhands with icy precision, he's quietly revolutionizing tennis in ways no one sees coming. While most players wear long sleeves and heavy fabrics, Lacoste cuts them down literally. He designs lighter, breathable cotton polos, the very shirt that would become the global Lacoste brand with its little green crocodile logo. But his impact didn't stop with fashion. In 1963, decades after his playing prime, he unveils the first steel tennis racket, breaking away from the wood frames that had ruled for a century. The shift is seismic. Suddenly, players can generate more power and spin. Within 10 years, Jimmy Connors is winning Wimbledon and the US Open with that steel racket in hand. Federations panic should such drastic technology be allowed. The ITF eventually steps in, creating clear rules on racket length, stringing, and materials. One man's curiosity changed both the clothes on our backs and the tools in our hands. But if Lacoste reshaped the look of tennis, the next figure reshaped the rhythm of every single match. Next up, Pancho Gonzalez. Now imagine a match that refuses to end. Not 4 hours, not 6. Try over 5 hours, with no end in sight because there is no tiebreak. In the 1,950 seconds and 60 seconds, Richard Pancho Gonzalez dominated professional tours with a serve and volley style so relentless that matches stretched deep into the night. His duels against Rod Laver, Ken Rosewall, and Lou Hode sometimes lasted 70, 80, even 100 games. In 1969 at Wimbledon, Gonzalez, then 41 years old, played Charlie Pasarell in a first-round match that went 5 sets and won 12 games. The final score? 22-24, 1-6, 16-14, 6-3, 11-9. It lasted 5 hours, 12 minutes, the longest in Wimbledon history at the time. Spectators left exhausted, broadcasters complained, and organizers knew something had to change. It was these marathons, fueled by Gonzalez's iron will and booming serve, that pushed officials to introduce the tiebreak in the 1,970 seconds. Without Pancho, we might still be watching matches stretch endlessly into the night. But if Gonzalez forced the clock into tennis, our next player forced the sport to ask, what happens when a man simply refuses to stay on the court? Sliding into Jeff Tarango. Wimbledon, 1,995. The genteel lawns, strawberries and cream, and then chaos. Jeff Tarango, an American known for his fiery temper, is playing Alexander Mronz in the third round. Suddenly he explodes at umpire Bruno Rebea, accusing him of corruption. The crowd boos. Tarango storms off mid-match, defaulting himself in one of the rarest Wimbledon scenes in history. But it didn't end there. In the locker room, his wife physically slapped the umpire, creating headlines worldwide. Tennis had seen tantrums before McEnroe, Connors, but walking off the court, that crossed a line Wimbledon couldn't ignore. The All England club, famous for its strict traditions, banned Tarango from the next year's tournament and fined him heavily. This bizarre meltdown pushed the ATP and ITF to tighten the default and conduct rules. If you quit in protest, sanctions would be severe. Tarango's infamous walkout lives on as the day manners met mayhem. And if one man's meltdown forced tennis to rewrite its rulebook, what happens when another man's booming serve threatened to make entire matches meaningless? Let's look at Goran Ivanisevic. Imagine facing a left-handed giant serving at over 130 miles per hour again and again. Goran Ivanišević in the 1,990 seconds was exactly that nightmare. In 1992, he blasted 206 aces in a single Wimbledon tournament, a record at the time. Against Richard Krajicek, he once fired 46 aces in one match. For perspective, that's more aces than many players hit in an entire season. Crowds loved the drama, aces raining down like cannon fire, but officials worried. Tennis risked becoming a serving contest, rallies reduced to one swing. As a result, tournament directors and federations began quietly adjusting conditions, slowing grass courts, using heavier balls, and increasing bounce to reward baseline rallies. By the 2000 seconds, Wimbledon had transformed from a serve fest into a stage for epic rallies between players like Federer and Nadal. Ivanišević himself capped his wild career with that 2001 Wimbledon victory as a wild card, hitting 213 aces across the fortnight. But his legacy isn't just lifting the trophy, it's how his thunderous arm forced tennis to rethink surfaces themselves. Yet as courts slowed, a new debate arose. Should players also speed up? Which brings us to a Swiss maestro who politely insisted the game move faster. Moving to Roger Federer. Federer glides onto court in the early 2000 seconds, seemingly weightless, making the sport look like ballet with a racket. But behind the grace, he had little patience for one creeping problem. Players dragging out time between points. Matches slowed, tension sagged. Federer wanted the game sharp, watchable, alive. He wasn't the first to complain, but as the sport's most respected figure, 20 Grand Slam titles, 310 weeks at number 1, his voice carried weight. He publicly called for officials to enforce the 25-second serve clock, insisting fans deserved rhythm, not delays. The ATP listened. By 2018, the serve clock appeared in majors, visible to players and spectators alike. Federer also influenced subtle tweaks like stricter warm-up timing because he embodied professionalism. His matches became the benchmark, fast, flowing, electric. While Nadal's routines tested the rule, Federer's advocacy ensured the sport stayed audience-friendly in an age of attention spans shrinking. So, one man's elegance sped the game up. But what happens when tragedy slows the entire sport to confront its darkest fears? That story begins with a teenage champion whose life was changed in a single, terrifying moment, coming in at Monica Seles, the 30th of April 1993, Hamburg, Germany. Monica Seles, just 19, already holds 8 Grand Slam titles, the youngest ever to dominate the sport. Then the unthinkable. During a changeover, a man leaps from the crowd and stabs her in the back. The knife misses her spine by millimeters, but the attack stops her career cold for 2 years. This single act of violence forces tennis to wake up. Until then, players sat inches from fans with minimal protection. After Seles, tournaments introduced on-court security, restricted fan access, and tightened player zones. Stadium layouts changed forever. Though she returned in 1995 and even won the 1,996 Australian Open, many argue she was never quite the same. Her story isn't just about dominance, it's about how one moment rewrote safety rules for every match since. And if tragedy forced security onto the court, what happens when a teenage genius pushes technology and officiating into the spotlight? At Martina Hingis, the Swiss Miss bursts onto the scene in 1997, winning the Australian Open at just 16. The youngest slam champion of the 20th century. Brilliant tactics, angelic touch, but also a fiery temper. Fast forward to the 1999 French Open final against Steffi Graf. Hingis, frustrated by close calls, walks to the other side of the net to argue with the umpire. Later, she takes an extended bathroom break mid-set. The Parisian crowd boos, chanting for Graf. Hingis collapses, sobbing on court. That meltdown became a turning point. Officials realized line calls and time violations couldn't rely only on human judgment. Within a few years, Hawkeye video review systems started appearing, offering challenges and reducing drama over disputed calls. Hingis's tantrum symbolized the sport's need for technology. Without her high-profile meltdown, tennis might have waited longer to embrace instant replay, but if Hingis forced officials to modernize, Guillermo Vilas forced them to rethink something more invisible, the math of rankings. Now, Guillermo Vilas. In the 1,970 seconds, Argentina's Guillermo Vilas becomes a machine. In 1977 alone, he wins 16 tournaments and 145 matches, records that still stun. He travels constantly, playing clay, carpet, hard courts, sometimes 3 continents in a month. But there's a problem. The ATP ranking system rewards sheer volume. Vilas racks up points by sheer grinding, entering dozens of smaller events. By contrast, rivals like Bjorn Borg play fewer, bigger tournaments. Critics call it point farming. The ATP reacts. They introduce caps only a certain number of tournaments can count toward rankings. This stops players from inflating their stats with endless minor titles. Vilas still goes down as a clay court legend with 62 career titles and a 46-match win streak on clay. But his relentless schedule forced the system itself to evolve, and if Vilas exposed how numbers could be gamed, the next story shows how one man gamed time itself, stalling, pausing, and breaking rhythm until officials had no choice but to act. Up next, Vitas Gerulaitis. Flashback to the 1,970 seconds. Vitas Gerulaitis, the flamboyant New Yorker with long blonde hair and disco star energy, becomes one of the sport's brightest lights. He wins the 1,977 Australian Open and famously ends a 16-match losing streak to Connors by joking, "Nobody beats Vitas Gerulaitis 17 times in a row." But Vitas had quirks. He was notorious for slowing down matches, long bathroom breaks, extended pauses between points, endless toweling off. Opponents fumed, fans groaned, and officials realized gamesmanship was eating into the spectacle. In marathon matches, Gerulaitis' stall tactics sometimes stretched contests past 4 hours, testing patience as much as endurance. The ATP responded by codifying stricter time limit rules, warm-ups capped at 5 minutes, medical breaks monitored, bathroom visits timed. Though others abused delays later, Gerulaitis' reputation as a charming rule-bender set the precedent. His life ended tragically in 1994 due to carbon monoxide poisoning at age 40, but his legacy lingers in the rulebook every time a chair umpire says, "time." And if Vitas bent the clock, Michael Chang bent the very definition of a serve. Let's move on to Michael Chang. Paris, 1989. A skinny 17-year-old American faces world number 1, Yvonne Lendl, in the French Open 4th round. Cramping, barely able to move, Chang suddenly does the unthinkable. He tosses the ball up and hits an underhand serve. Lendl freezes, loses the point, and the crowd gasps. Chang wins that match, then goes on to claim the title, becoming the youngest male Grand Slam champion ever. But the serve sparks outrage. Was it legal? Unsportsmanlike? The ITF reviews the rulebook and confirms underhand serves are 100% legal. No trickery ban exists. That single moment forced opponents to stay alert for any kind of serve. Chang's ingenuity changed tactical norms overnight. Players like Nick Kyrgios later revived the move, but it all began with that 1989 afternoon in Paris. Beyond the serve, Chang also tested the limits of bathroom breaks and delay tactics, fueling further time limit enforcement. He proved a teenager could rewrite history with one flick of the wrist. But if Chang bent the rules creatively, the next player smashed through them with pure chaos. Coming in hot at Nick Kyrgios. Nick Kyrgios, the Australian showman, enters the tour in the 2010 seconds like a fireball. He stuns Rafael Nadal at Wimbledon 2014, then builds a reputation as tennis's wildest talent. Tweeners, underhand serves, even a between-the-legs ace, it all keeps fans on edge. But the fireworks don't stop at shot-making. Kyrgios racks up $800,000 plus in fines, more than any player in ATP history. He argues with umpires, smashes rackets, and once was fined $113,000 at the 2019 Cincinnati Masters alone. The ATP's response? Reinforce sportsmanship codes and even introduce mental health support programs, acknowledging players' emotional strain. His behavior isn't just punished, it forces officials to rethink player welfare. Yet Kyrgios is magnetic. Crowds pack arenas, knowing anything might happen, brilliance or meltdown. Love him or hate him, he drags tennis into the spotlight of global conversation. Kyrgios shows that even in the 21st century, one player can bend the sport's identity. But while Nick clashed with rules of conduct, Novak Djokovic forced the game to rewrite rules about the body itself. Next is Novak Djokovic. Novak Djokovic's story isn't just about dominance, 24 Grand Slam titles, 400-plus weeks at world number 1, it's also about testing every limit written in the rulebook. Fans and rivals noticed his uncanny timing for bathroom and medical breaks. Just when momentum swung against him, Novak disappeared off court, sometimes for 10 or 12 minutes. Coincidence or strategy? At the 2021 Australian Open, he famously took a long injury timeout against Taylor Fritz, returned, and somehow won in 5 sets. Andy Murray once remarked that Djokovic's miraculous recoveries always seemed to arrive at critical moments. The uproar forced the ATP and ITF to tighten medical timeout regulations. Players must specify the injury, time is capped, and bathroom breaks are strictly timed. In 2022, the Grand Slam board reduced allowed bathroom breaks to 1 per match. Djokovic may be the fittest player alive, but his gamesmanship reshaped how tennis polices the body itself. And if Novak tested timeouts, Nadal tested time itself with rituals so slow they rewrote how fast the game must move. Let's talk about Rafael Nadal. Watch Rafael Nadal before he serves. The bouncing, the hair tucking, the shirt adjusting, the endless ritual. For fans, it's a signature. For opponents, a nightmare. By the mid-2000 seconds, Nadal was routinely taking 30-40 seconds between points. Umpires warned him, rivals complained, but Nadal kept winning 14 French Opens, 22 Grand Slam titles total, all while playing at his own rhythm. Matches stretched long into the night. This wasn't sustainable. Audiences grew restless, television schedules broke, and tournaments begged for a solution. In 2018, the ATP introduced the visible 25-second serve clock, ticking down for everyone to see. If it hit 0, automatic fault. Though Nadal bristled, insisting routines were necessary, the rules stuck. Today, every match Federer, Djokovic, Kyrgios runs under Nadal's shadow. The pace of the sport itself was permanently altered. And if Nadal changed how quickly points unfold, Venus Williams forced tennis to confront an even bigger question: how to treat athletes when life itself interrupts competition. At Venus Williams, Wimbledon 2000. Venus Williams wins her first major at just 20, launching a career that would bring 7 Grand Slam singles titles and Olympic gold. But her greatest battle wasn't only on court. In 2018, after Serena took maternity leave, rankings dropped her unfairly. Venus championed the push to protect women returning from pregnancy. By 2019, the WTA introduced the protected seeding rule, ensuring mothers weren't punished for starting families. This wasn't her first fight for fairness. Back in 2005, Venus stood before the All England Club, arguing for equal prize money. Wimbledon relented in 2007, thanks largely to her voice. Her legacy is both athletic and structural. 49 singles titles, world number 1, but also seismic shifts in how the sport treats women. Venus proved rules aren't just about points or time, they're about dignity. And if Venus redefined fairness for mothers, Serena, her sister, would ignite firestorms that rewrote the code of confrontation itself. Here's Serena Williams. Serena Williams isn't only a 23-time Grand Slam champion, she's a lightning rod for controversy that reshaped tennis rules. One unforgettable night, the 2009 US Open semifinal. Serving at 4-6, 5-6, 15-30 against Kim Clijsters, Serena foot faults. Furious, she threatens the line judge, "I swear I'll shove this ball down your throat." Defaulted. Fined $82,500, the biggest fine in women's tennis at the time. Fast forward to the 2018 US Open final versus Naomi Osaka. Serena, frustrated with a coaching violation called against her, smashes a racket, then calls umpire Carlos Ramos a thief. Osaka wins, but the headlines? All Serena. The backlash forces tennis to clarify on-court coaching, verbal abuse penalties, and umpire authority. She also changed maternity rules. After returning in 2018, her low ranking sparked debate, leading the WTA to strengthen protected seeding for mothers. Serena's impact is written into the rulebook as much as into history. Her 73 career singles titles and $94 million in prize money prove it. But if Serena battled rules with raw confrontation, Andre Agassi fought them with neon colors and rebellion. Coming up at Andre Agassi. Late 1,980 seconds. Tennis dresses in white, whispers tradition. Then walks in Andre Agassi with ripped denim shorts, neon shirts, and a mane of hair later revealed to be a wig. The Las Vegas Kid declares war on Wimbledon's all-white dress code, skipping the tournament 3 years straight. By 1992, when Agassi finally plays, he wins Wimbledon outright. But the All England Club never budged. Instead, they doubled down. 90% of clothing must be white, no flashy trim. Even Roger Federer once got told off for orange-soled shoes in 2013. Agassi's defiance cemented Wimbledon's rule as the strictest in sport. Agassi's influence went deeper. He was the first to wear colorful Nike gear, creating the modern template for tennis as fashion. And beyond clothes, he admitted using meth in his 2009 autobiography, nearly costing him his titles. Still, his 8 Grand Slam wins and career Grand Slam status speak louder. Agassi forced tennis to draw its cultural line in chalk, yet if he tested tradition through style, Jimmy Connors tested it with fury. Now at Jimmy Connors. Jimmy Connors played tennis like a street fight. Between 1974 and 1976, he won 8 of 10 Grand Slam finals and held world number 1 for 160 consecutive weeks. But his on-court persona? Explosive. Connors smashed rackets, insulted umpires, and once flipped off a US Open crowd. In 1991, age 39, his Cinderella run to the semifinals was peppered with tirades that television cameras couldn't ignore. He turned tennis into theater, half genius, half brawler. His antics forced the ATP to toughen unsportsmanlike conduct penalties. Escalating fines, warnings, and suspensions became standard. By the late 1980 seconds, his legacy, alongside McEnroe's, ensured no tantrum went unpunished. But Connors wasn't just temper. He holds a record 109 ATP titles, more than Federer, Nadal, or Djokovic. His two-handed backhand inspired generations. Still, ask insiders, and many say Connors' most lasting impact was forcing tennis to crack down on behavior. Connors showed you could win with fists clenched, but if he was fire, McEnroe was nuclear tantrums so famous they made entire new rule books. Let's move to John McEnroe. Wimbledon, 1981. A young American storms onto center court, volleys crisp, hair wild, but what people remember is 4 words: "You cannot be serious." John McEnroe, frustrated with a line call, screams at the umpire, veins bulging, racket waving. That single outburst becomes the most famous tantrum in tennis history. And it wasn't a one-off. McEnroe's career was a mix of genius 7 Grand Slam singles titles, 77 ATP trophies, 170 weeks at number 1, and volcanic rage. He smashed rackets, cursed at officials, and got fined so often he was nicknamed Super Brat by the British tabloids. In 1990, at the Australian Open, he became the first player in the Open era to be defaulted from a slam for cumulative code violations. His behavior forced tennis to create the point penalty system: first offense warning, second offense loss of a point, third offense loss of a game, further offenses possible default. McEnroe proved brilliance and bad behavior could share the same body. But if McEnroe rewrote enforcement, Ilie Nastase wrote the very code those punishments came from. And finally, Ilie Nastase. Before McEnroe, before Connors, tennis already had a wild man, Ilie Nastase, nicknamed Nasty. In the 1970 seconds, the Romanian dazzled with athleticism, US Open champion 1972, French Open 1973, world number 1 in 1973, but his antics overshadowed even his success. He insulted opponents, mocked umpires, and baited crowds. He'd call for bathroom breaks mid-game, stall endlessly, or joke with ball kids mid-rally. At one match, he pulled a spare racket from his shorts as a prank. At another, he sat in a spectator's lap during play. Fans laughed, but opponents fumed. The tipping point came when Nastase's behavior escalated into obscenity and gamesmanship so disruptive that tennis had no formal rules to stop him. The result? The ATP introduced the Code of Conduct in 1972, the first official rulebook governing player behavior. Every fine, warning, or default today traces back to Nastase. Though he won 87 career titles, his greatest legacy isn't trophies, it's the disciplinary system designed to control him. Nastase closed the circle. One man so unruly, tennis had to invent laws just to keep the sport watchable. And that's the story: 20 players so bold they forced tennis itself to change. Every rule has a rebel behind it, and the game will never be the same. Subscribe now and click the next video on your screen to keep the story going.